Have you ever said something or created something, and when you look back upon that or listen to that again some years later, you just cringe? You're like, oh my gosh, did I really say that? Well, today we're going to look at some comments from Lisa where she points out three of my teachings that today make me go, oh my gosh, yeah, that is so problematic. And, but that's not, of course, that's not the top. The topic here is like we're going to look at these teachings and see the problems in them and see the new version, how we teach things now, which I think is a much more helpful, nice, gentle, and insightful way. So I think this will bring a lot of value as we're going with this. But before we look at Lisa's comments in today's episode of Mining the Comments, just a super quick thing. I recently discovered a Bob Dylan song called My Back Pages. And the refrain just struck me very interesting. The refrain goes, I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now, something like that. And, it immediately caught my attention. I thought that was very interesting. And then when I read about the song, apparently it's about how Bob Dylan in his younger years was very much like, kind of a little bit like high and mighty, like, everybody's consciousness. And he was like, this is right, this is wrong, etc. And a little bit, looking back upon that, he realized that there was more gray than black and white. Things were more complex. And he said that, he says that I was so much older then, and I'm actually younger than that now, implying that, when we think of being old, we think of something being kind of fixed and rigid, and young, we think of something being kind of more flexible. But at the same time, that's the opposite of what happened in his case, right? He was more old when he was young and more young when he was old. So it really has nothing to do with age. It has much more to do with like, our mindset and how we're thinking, etc. And I thought it was a really nice song. And I told my wife that I was like, I hope somebody asks me about like, something I said about like when I was more like, a CBT person. And then I'll get to say this. So actually, Lisa gave me an invitation to say, I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now. So there we go. I got to say it. Anyways, enough of backstory. Let's jump into this. Lisa really pointed out, it was actually striking to me, the three things that Lisa pointed out here, because I think they are like maybe the three things where I've been kind of like, things have changed a lot. Let me put it that way. So this is the comment from Lisa. It's on the episode about like appearance insomnia, where the thumbnail says, worried about your looks if you don't sleep. And Lisa said the following. Hi, Daniel. I recently discovered this channel and your books, and after having struggled with extreme insomnia on and off for 15 years, recently making me almost give up on life, your teachings have provided me some hope. So first of all, thank you. Amazing. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so glad you're finding some hope here. And yeah, now I'm going into coaching mode. Let's keep reading. What I'm a bit confused about are parts of your teachings. For example, the 17-hour rule and the sleep window. If I start implementing those, isn't that just new sleep efforts? Also, you talk about going to bed once you're sleepy, not just tired. Even though exhausted, I haven't felt sleepy for months. What applies in such cases? So three things that, I've really changed kind of how I think about, I really think it's changed my teaching around these things. And just so I don't forget it, I would say like, yes, the way I taught this earlier, this can definitely become sleep efforts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at these, where in hindsight, I said, this is why I think what I taught before was incorrect, and how I think, or incorrect sounds a little harsh, but it was not the most helpful, and how I teach things now. So, and by the way, all this, I believe, probably Lisa got from Set It and Forget It, which I'm not planning to do like a second edition or revision of it, because I think it's a nice, easy read. And although things are simplified, sometimes that's what you need. So with that in mind, things look a little different now. But anyways, let's start with let's actually start where Lisa started, which was the 17-hour rule, which is has its own chapter here, the 17-hour rule. And basically, the idea that I present in this chapter is that we, quote unquote, need a certain amount of sleep drive to produce a certain amount of sleep. And I said like, oh, If somebody sleeps about 7 hours, that means they need 17 hours of wakefulness to produce enough sleep for 7 hours of sleep. Which, the problem with this, is that this 17-hour rule assumes that there's zero influence of hyperarousal. That kind of it's sort of like saying, like, the only thing that determines how much you eat is how hungry you are. How you think, how you feel, circumstances like that don't play a role at all, which of course is inhuman. None of us are like that. So the 17-hour rule assumes no influence of hyperarousal, and therefore it does not really apply to us humans. And the tricky thing here, of course, is what Lisa says, that it can sound like, aha, I figured it out. I need to make myself stay awake for this long to sleep this long. And then it becomes a sleep effort. It becomes an attempt to try to control sleep. It creates, struggle and hyperarousal, which keeps us from sleeping well. Absolutely. But then someone would say, like, okay, so, isn't sleep drive a real thing? Doesn't it play any role? I would say it is a real thing. Of course it is a real thing. The longer we stay awake, the more sleep drive we have, and the more likelihood that we will sleep. That is a real thing, but it's not what matters. As Coach Veronica said very recently, she said, if us with insomnia could bottle up our sleep drive and sell it, we would be millionaires. Like, insomnia is not a sleep drive issue whatsoever. And so I'm realizing that my next thing here could maybe actually, I'm going to move something. Let's just go over this. As having some structure can invite us to leave chasing sleep. And so in this chapter about the 17-hour rule, I talk about how, I use the word importance. Like, it's so important to have a set wake up time, which, I don't even use the word important anymore, because it can lead to pressure and effort, right? But I would say this, having some structure, saying like, okay, for now, I'll get up, start my day around the same time every day. Having some structure can indeed be an invitation to leave chasing sleep. It can be an invitation to not stay in bed trying to get more sleep, because if we're in bed just I'm gonna try to get some more sleep, I'm gonna stay a little longer to see if I can get some more sleep, then we're sort of teaching the brain that we should be chasing sleep. We should try to get as much as of it as possible. We're in this kind of scarcity mindset, and that keeps us in this loop of the more we try, the less we get, etc. So having some structure can be an invitation to let go of chasing sleep, and that can help, because that can reduce our hyperarousal, right? And again, that has nothing to do with sleep drive, but this is why some structure can help, because it again leads us away from that chasing sleep. And so I would say, in summary here, is that the 17-hour rule no longer is part of our teaching. It's never talk about that anymore. Now, number 2 here, I'm smiling because this is kind of self-examination. There's a little bit. I'm kind of cringing a little bit as we go forward here. Sleep window. So the way I talk about sleep window here in Set It and Forget It, I talk about I said here, for example, remember the gas pedal. Remember how wakefulness is the only thing that can produce sleep. Well, then you know that a strong sleep drive is important. I'm reading this no, it's not about that. So what I'm saying is the sleep window, yes, the sleep window, as I taught it and Set It and Forget It, I still thought back then that sleep drive was kind of one important factor, and it's good to get that one right, et cetera, which I don't do anymore, because I see that, insomnia again is not about sleep drive. We have plenty of that. So the way I teach sleep drive then is no longer how we teach it now, but we still have this timeless sleep window, which we teach now. So now our current teaching is the timeless sleep window instead. And it can look the same, but the intent is completely opposite. The intent with the timeless sleepless window is just this invitation. It's an invitation to leave attempts at control. It's an invitation to say okay, between 10:30 p.m. and 6 in the morning, I'm just not going to know what time it is. I'm not going to check the time. If I'm awake, I'm going to do something that makes it more acceptable for me to be awake, something that makes it easier. That I think can help, because again, it's about changing our relationship with being awake at night and not being so afraid of being awake. So that's our new teaching there. And number 3, saying just go to bed when you feel sleepy. It kind of sounds reasonable. It's okay, yeah, that sounds like it makes sense. But like Lisa points out, what if you don't feel sleepy? What if like you have this kind of underlying hyperarousal that just masks it, that makes you not feel sleepy, right? It becomes really tricky. And so and it can also lead to self-monitoring and idealism. So when somebody says like go to bed when you feel sleepy, it can make you think like, oh, I've got to monitor myself so I know if I'm sleepy, and I got to know if I'm sleepy enough. Like, is this the right level of sleepiness? It creates its own set of struggles. So what an analogy I like to use is this one. We don't wait to feel the exact right level of hunger to go to the dinner table. If we did, we'd probably be like, oh, I'm hungry, but I'm hungry enough. Should I be eating now? And that creates that hyperarousal and anxiety, and then we're no longer hungry, right? And then we're like, what happened to our hunger? The exact same thing here. So I think what is much more helpful than what we teach now is basically doing what we feel like. If somebody feels like going to bed, that's totally fine. If somebody feels like staying out of bed, that's totally fine. We don't need any type of cue to tell us when the exact right moment is to do something like that. And when we uh, actually leave rules, and we're more flexible, and we focus more on the kind of big picture understanding, that leads to where we want to be. So, Lisa, I hope this clarified these points that these points that you brought up with such precision. You really found three things that were really tricky from Set and Forget It. But I hope this clarifies. And if you and everyone else here in the community, if you're finding your way to where you want to be, that is wonderful. And do share with us, what you found insightful and how things are going. If, on the other hand, things are tricky, it's hard for you to connect the dot, and you would like to learn with us. As you see, we're always upgrading and updating our teachings. Well, if so, then head over to our website, sleepcoachschool.com. Check out our coaching options. And if you decide to join one of our programs, we are looking forward to seeing you on the inside. That was all for this week. Look forward to seeing you next week. Onwards and inwards. Bye for now.